Today they are the world's most bitter rivals, locked in a shadow war that threatens to ignite the entire Middle East. But what if I told you that just a few decades ago, Israel and Iran were not enemies, but the closest of strategic allies? From the ancient decree of Cyrus the Great to the secret oil pipelines of the 1970s, the history you think you know is only half the story. Join us as we uncover the hidden echoes of a partnership that turned into a global confrontation. This is the silent war you were never supposed to understand. If you value deep historical insights, please like and subscribe. Your support allows us to bring even higher quality visuals and stories to life. Thank you for being part of this journey. The Prologue. In the complex tapestry of modern geopolitics, few rivalries are as intense or as defining as the one between Israel and Iran. Today, their names are often spoken in the same breath as tension, shadow wars, and regional influence. But history is a master of irony. To understand the present, we must look past the headlines and into the echoes of a time when these two nations were not adversaries, but strategic partners. This is not just a story of political disagreement. It is a journey through thousands of years of shared heritage, shifting identities, and a revolution that changed the world forever. To find the very first threads of this connection, we must travel back over 2,500 years. In the year 539 before the Common Era, the Persian king Cyrus the Great entered the city of Babylon. His arrival marked a turning point in human history. Unlike the conquerors before him, Cyrus issued a decree that allowed displaced peoples to return to their ancestral lands. Among them were the Judeans, who had been in exile for decades. Cyrus did more than just grant them freedom. He supported the reconstruction of their sacred temple in Jerusalem. In the ancient texts, this Persian king is remembered not as an oppressor, but as a liberator. For centuries, the relationship between the Persian and Jewish peoples was defined by this foundational act of respect and cultural exchange. Through the rise and fall of empires, from the Parthians to the Sassanids, the Jewish communities within the Persian Empire often found a level of stability and integration that was rare in the ancient world. They became scholars, merchants, and integral parts of the Persian social fabric. Even as religions shifted and borders were redrawn, the underlying cultural respect remained a constant. This long period of coexistence is essential to understand, because it proves that the current hostility is not an ancient, inevitable blood feud. It is a modern construct, born from the specific pressures of the 20th century. To see how this ancient bond was rediscovered and then shattered, we must move forward to the era of modern nation-states. The story of Israel and Iran is not just about conflict, it is about transformation. As centuries passed, the world changed dramatically. Empires rose and fell, new ideologies emerged, and the map of the Middle East was redrawn. To understand the roots of today's tensions, we must explore the modern era, where old alliances were tested and new rivalries born. The 20th century brought unprecedented change. The fall of empires, the rise of nationalism, and the creation of new states reshaped the region. Iran, under the Pahlavi dynasty, sought modernization and Western alliances. Meanwhile, the establishment of Israel in 1948 introduced a new dynamic to the Middle East. These developments set the stage for a complex relationship that would evolve dramatically in the decades to come. The Modern Awakening. As the 19th century faded, the Middle East stood at a crossroads. The Ottoman Empire, once a dominant force, was fracturing, leaving a power vacuum that would soon be filled by new national aspirations. In Persia, a movement for constitutional reform was stirring, while in Europe, the Zionist movement began to envision a return to the ancestral homeland. These two parallel journeys, though geographically separate, were destined to intersect in the crucible of modern geopolitics. In 1921, a military officer named Reza Khan took control of the Iranian government, eventually establishing the Pahlavi dynasty. His vision was clear: to transform Persia into a modern, secular, and industrialized nation-state. He renamed the country Iran in 1935, signaling a break from the past and a new focus on Aryan heritage. This drive for modernization required international partners, and the Shah looked toward the West for inspiration and technical expertise. The end of World War II accelerated the redrawing of the global map. In 1948, the State of Israel was established, a moment that sent shockwaves through the region. While many Arab nations immediately declared their opposition, Iran's position was more nuanced. Under the young Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, Iran was navigating its own path, balancing its Islamic identity with a strategic need for stable, non-Arab allies in a rapidly changing neighborhood. To understand why Iran and Israel became allies, we must look at the periphery doctrine. Developed by Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, this strategy sought to build alliances with non-Arab nations on the edges of the Middle East, specifically Iran, Turkey, and Ethiopia. The logic was simple: the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Both Israel and Iran felt threatened by the rising tide of pan-Arab nationalism led by Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser. In 1950, Iran became the second Muslim-majority country after Turkey to grant de facto recognition to Israel. This wasn't a full public diplomatic embrace, but it opened the door for a discreet and highly effective partnership. For Iran, Israel represented a source of advanced technology and a back channel to Washington. For Israel, Iran was a vital source of energy and a strategic counterweight to its hostile neighbors. One of the strongest pillars of this silent alliance was energy. Following the nationalization of the Iranian oil industry and the subsequent 1953 coup, the Shah regained control and needed reliable markets. Israel, cut off from Arab oil supplies, became a major customer. A secret pipeline was eventually constructed to transport Iranian crude from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean, bypassing the Suez Canal and cementing a bond of mutual economic survival. The cooperation extended far beyond oil and weapons. Israeli experts arrived in Iran to help transform its agricultural landscape. They introduced advanced irrigation techniques, helped reclaim salt-damaged land, and shared expertise in public health and infrastructure. In the eyes of the Iranian leadership, Israel was a model of how a small, resource-poor nation could rapidly modernize through science and innovation. Behind closed doors, the security relationship was even deeper. Iran's intelligence service, the Savak, and Israel's Mossad shared critical information about regional threats and Soviet influence. They conducted joint training exercises and coordinated strategies to maintain the status quo. This intelligence bridge allowed both nations to punch above their weight in a region that was increasingly becoming a primary theater of the Cold War. By the late 1960s, the relationship had reached its zenith. Thousands of Israelis lived and worked in Tehran, and El Al, Israel's national airline, operated regular flights between Tel Aviv and the Iranian capital. It was a time of cultural exchange and professional respect. To the elites in both cities, the partnership seemed like a permanent fixture of the Middle Eastern landscape, a stabilizing force in an otherwise volatile region. However, beneath the surface of this golden age, tensions were beginning to simmer. The Shah's rapid modernization and his close ties to both the West and Israel were alienating large segments of the Iranian population. Religious conservatives and leftist intellectuals alike began to view the alliance as a betrayal of Iran's sovereignty and its Islamic heritage. The echoes of this discontent were growing louder, signaling that the silent war was about to take a dramatic turn. The winds of change. In the early 1960s, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi launched the White Revolution, a series of ambitious reforms aimed at modernizing Iran's social and economic structures. Land reform, women's suffrage, and literacy programs were introduced to transform the country into a global power. While these changes were celebrated in the West, they deeply unsettled the traditional clerical establishment, who saw their influence and landholdings threatened by the Shah's secular vision. Among the most vocal critics of the Shah's reforms was a charismatic cleric named Ruhollah Khomeini. From the holy city of Qom, he denounced the White Revolution as a Western plot and accused the Shah of being a puppet of the United States and Israel. Khomeini's message resonated with those who felt marginalized by the rapid pace of change and the perceived erosion of Islamic values. His arrest and subsequent exile in 1964 only served to turn him into a powerful symbol of resistance. The United States, meanwhile, viewed Iran as a vital bulwark against Soviet expansion in the Middle East. The 1953 coup, which restored the Shah to power, had cemented a deep and enduring partnership. Washington provided Iran with billions of dollars in military aid and advanced weaponry, turning the country into a regional superpower. This close relationship, however, also made the Shah a target for those who saw American influence as a form of modern-day imperialism. The 1973 oil crisis brought a massive influx of wealth to Iran as prices skyrocketed. The Shah used this windfall to accelerate his modernization programs and build one of the most powerful militaries in the world. But this sudden wealth also brought rampant inflation and a widening gap between the urban elite and the rural poor. The glitz and glamour of Tehran stood in stark contrast to the struggles of those in the provinces, fueling a sense of injustice and resentment. To maintain control, the Shah relied heavily on the Savak, his notorious internal security and intelligence service. Trained by both the CIA and Mossad, the Savak became a symbol of state repression, known for its surveillance, arrests, and harsh treatment of political dissidents. This climate of fear silenced many, but it also radicalized a generation of activists who saw no path for peaceful change within the existing system. In 1971, the Shah hosted a lavish celebration at the ancient ruins of Persepolis to mark the 2500th anniversary of the Persian Empire. The event, attended by world leaders and royalty, was intended to showcase Iran's greatness and its link to a glorious past. But to many Iranians struggling with poverty and inflation, the opulence of the party was a slap in the face, further alienating the monarchy from the people it claimed to represent. By the mid-1970s, a broad and unlikely coalition of opposition groups had formed against the Shah. Secular liberals, leftist students, and religious conservatives found common ground in their desire to end the monarchy. Despite their different visions for Iran's future, they were united by a shared sense of grievance and a belief that the Shah's time was running out. The echoes of protest were growing louder in the streets of Tehran and beyond. The election of Jimmy Carter in 1976 introduced a new variable into the equation. Carter's focus on human rights put pressure on the Shah to liberalize his regime and reduce political repression. While the Shah made some concessions, they were seen as too little, too late by the opposition. The perceived softening of American support also emboldened the protesters, who sensed that the Shah's grip on power was finally beginning to slip. In August 1978, a devastating fire at the Cinema Rex in Abadan killed hundreds of people. While the exact cause remains a subject of debate, the opposition quickly blamed the Savak, sparking a wave of outrage and mass protests across the country. The tragedy became a rallying cry for the revolution, as millions of Iranians took to the streets to demand the Shah's ouster. The momentum was now unstoppable, and the monarchy was on the brink of collapse. In January 1979, a weary and ailing Mohammad Reza Pahlavi left Iran for what would be a permanent exile. Weeks later, Ayatollah Khomeini returned from his long exile in France, greeted by millions of cheering supporters. The Pahlavi era was over, and a new revolutionary chapter in Iran's history was about to begin. The silent alliance with Israel was dead, and a new era of ideological confrontation was born. The echoes of 1979 would reshape the Middle East for decades to come. The Revolutionary Rupture. With the Shah gone and Ayatollah Khomeini in power, Iran underwent a total systemic overhaul. The 1979 referendum officially established the Islamic Republic, a unique theocratic system where ultimate authority rested with the supreme leader. This wasn't just a change in leadership. It was a rejection of the secular, Western-aligned path Iran had followed for decades. The new constitution placed Islamic law at the center of governance, signaling a radical departure from the Pahlavi era. Almost immediately, the new regime's foreign policy shifted toward a stance of neither East nor West. Khomeini's rhetoric targeted the two powers he believed had exploited Iran: the United States, labeled the Great Satan, and Israel, referred to as the little Satan. This language wasn't merely symbolic, it was a foundational pillar of the revolution's identity, framed as a struggle for the oppressed against imperialist influence in the Muslim world. In November 1979, the tension reached a breaking point when Iranian students stormed the US embassy in Tehran, taking dozens of Americans hostage. The crisis, which lasted 444 days, shattered the diplomatic relationship between Washington and Tehran. For the revolutionaries, the embassy was a nest of spies that had orchestrated the 1953 coup. For the United States, it was an unprecedented violation of international law that turned Iran into a primary global adversary. The break with Israel was even more abrupt. Within days of the revolution, Iran severed all diplomatic and commercial links. The Israeli mission in Tehran was handed over to the Palestine Liberation Organization, and the once thriving cooperation in oil and technology vanished. The periphery doctrine was replaced by a commitment to regional movements that challenged Israeli sovereignty, turning former strategic partners into bitter ideological foes. In 1980, as Iran was still reeling from internal upheaval, Saddam Hussein's Iraq launched a full-scale invasion. The brutal 8-year conflict that followed was a defining moment for the young Islamic Republic. It reinforced the regime's sense of encirclement and its need for self-reliance. Paradoxically, during the early stages of the war, Israel discreetly facilitated some arms sales to Iran, hoping to weaken Iraq, a reminder that even in a new era of hostility, old strategic calculations occasionally lingered in the shadows. A key tenet of the new Iranian leadership was the export of the revolution. Tehran sought to inspire similar movements across the Middle East, challenging established monarchies and Western influence. This mission led to the cultivation of deep ties with various regional groups, particularly in Lebanon. By providing financial and ideological support, Iran began to build a network of influence that would allow it to project power far beyond its own borders, directly into the heart of the Levant. The 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon provided a critical opportunity for Iran to expand its reach. In the chaos of the Lebanese civil war, Iranian Revolutionary Guard advisors helped organize and train a new movement that would become Hezbollah. This group became the primary vehicle for Iran's proxy strategy, creating a permanent front of resistance on Israel's northern border. The silent war was no longer just about rhetoric. It now had a physical, armed presence. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, the rivalry evolved into a sophisticated shadow war. It was a conflict defined by intelligence operations, targeted actions, and cyber maneuvers. Both sides sought to undermine the other's interests without triggering a direct conventional war that could devastate the region. This gray zone of conflict allowed for a constant state of pressure, where every move was a message and every setback was a calculated risk in a much larger game. By the late 1990s, a new and even more sensitive issue began to dominate the discourse: Iran's nuclear program. While Tehran maintained its program was for peaceful energy purposes, Israel and the West viewed it as a path toward a strategic weapon that would fundamentally alter the regional balance of power. This concern became the central focus of international diplomacy and a primary driver of the escalating tension between the two nations. As the 21st century dawned, the United States solidified its role as Israel's primary strategic shield against Iranian influence. Through massive military aid, shared intelligence, and diplomatic backing, Washington sought to contain Tehran's regional ambitions. This triangular dynamic, the US, Israel, and Iran, became the defining axis of Middle Eastern geopolitics, where the interests of a global superpower were inextricably linked to a local, yet deeply rooted rivalry. The shifting sands of the 21st century. The dawn of the 21st century brought a seismic shift to global security. Following the attacks of September 11th, the United States launched the War on Terror, leading to the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. While these actions were aimed at eliminating immediate threats, they inadvertently removed Iran's two primary regional rivals, the Taliban to the east and Saddam Hussein to the west. This sudden power vacuum presented Tehran with an unprecedented opportunity to project its influence across a fractured Middle East. As Iraq struggled with internal instability following the 2003 invasion, Iran began to cultivate deep political and security ties with various groups within the country. This was the beginning of what King Abdullah of Jordan famously called the Shia Crescent, a continuous arc of Iranian influence stretching through Iraq, Syria, and into Lebanon. For Israel, this wasn't just a political shift, it was a strategic encirclement, bringing Iranian-aligned forces closer to its borders than ever before. In 2006, a month-long conflict between Israel and Hezbollah served as a brutal demonstration of this new reality. Hezbollah, heavily supported by Iranian funding and weaponry, proved to be a formidable and well-organized force. The conflict highlighted the effectiveness of Iran's proxy strategy, allowing Tehran to exert significant pressure on Israel without a single Iranian soldier stepping onto the battlefield. The silent war was becoming increasingly audible and destructive. The 2011 Arab Spring further complicated the regional mosaic. When the uprising in Syria evolved into a devastating civil war, Iran viewed the survival of the Assad regime as a strategic necessity. Syria was the vital land bridge connecting Tehran to Hezbollah in Lebanon. By deploying advisors and supporting allied militias, Iran ensured its presence in the heart of the Levant, creating a permanent, forward-operating base that directly overlooked the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. In 2015, after years of intense diplomacy, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal, was signed. While the Obama administration and European powers saw it as a way to freeze Iran's nuclear ambitions, Israel's leadership viewed it as a historic mistake. They argued the deal provided Tehran with a path to a weapon while infusing its economy with billions of dollars that would inevitably fund its regional activities and allied movements. The 2018 decision by the Trump administration to unilaterally withdraw from the nuclear deal marked another pivot point. Washington embarked on a maximum pressure campaign, reimposing crippling sanctions to force Iran back to the negotiating table. This move was strongly supported by Israel, but led to a period of heightened maritime tensions and drone incidents in the Persian Gulf, as Tehran sought to demonstrate that it would not be isolated without a cost to global energy markets. In response to the growing Iranian influence, a new and unexpected diplomatic alignment emerged. The 2020 Abraham Accords saw several Arab nations, including the UAE and Bahrain, normalize relations with Israel. This wasn't just about trade, it was a strategic realignment of status quo powers who shared a common concern regarding Iran's regional reach. The periphery doctrine of the 1950s was being reinvented, but this time Israel was aligning with its Arab neighbors against a common non-Arab rival. As conventional tensions simmered, a new front opened in the digital world. Both Israel and Iran became pioneers in state-sponsored cyber operations, targeting each other's critical infrastructure, from water systems to nuclear facilities. These invisible strikes allowed for a constant state of attrition, where damage could be inflicted with a high degree of deniability. In this modern era, a line of code could be just as impactful as a traditional kinetic maneuver. To understand the persistent US involvement, we must look at the broader strategic interests. For Washington, the Middle East remains a critical node in global trade and energy security. Beyond supporting a key ally like Israel, the US seeks to prevent any single power from dominating the region's vital maritime choke points, such as the Strait of Hormuz. Containing Iranian influence is seen as essential to maintaining the rules-based order and ensuring the stability of the global economy. Today, the rivalry has reached a complex and dangerous stalemate. Every action by one side triggers a calculated reaction from the other, creating a cycle of tension that keeps the entire region on edge. It is a conflict defined by red lines and strategic patience, where both sides understand the catastrophic cost of a full-scale war, yet neither is willing to back down from their core ideological and security objectives. The echoes of the past have become the sirens of the present. The precipice of the present. By late 2023, the Middle East faced a sudden and violent reawakening of old tensions. a major regional event triggered a chain reaction that tested every red line established over the previous decades. Iran's network of regional allies, from the Levant to the Red Sea, began to coordinate their actions with unprecedented synchronization. For Israel, this was the multi-front nightmare it had long prepared for, as security challenges emerged simultaneously from the north, south, and east. The conflict quickly expanded beyond traditional borders, reaching the vital maritime corridors of the Red Sea. Allied movements in Yemen began targeting commercial shipping, claiming their actions were in support of regional sovereignty. This move directly threatened one of the world's most critical trade routes, forcing the United States and its international partners to launch naval operations to protect global commerce. The silent war was now impacting the price of goods in every corner of the globe. In April 2024, the decades-long shadow war finally stepped into the light. Following a high-profile incident at a diplomatic facility in Damascus, Iran launched a massive direct aerial operation against Israel. Hundreds of drones and missiles were intercepted in a historic display of integrated air defense involving Israel, the United States, and even regional Arab partners. For the first time, the two rivals had engaged in direct state-on-state combat, shattering the long-standing taboo of indirect proxy warfare. Throughout this escalation, the United States reaffirmed its ironclad commitment to Israeli security. Washington deployed carrier strike groups and advanced missile defense systems to the region, serving as a powerful deterrent against further escalation. This support wasn't just about military hardware. It was a clear signal to Tehran that any attempt to fundamentally alter the regional balance of power would be met with the full weight of American strategic influence. The modern battlefield has become a testing ground for revolutionary technologies. From AI-driven intelligence gathering to hypersonic missile development and sophisticated electronic warfare, both sides are locked in a high-stakes arms race. These advancements have shortened the decision window for leaders, making the risk of accidental escalation higher than ever before. In this new era, the speed of technology often outpaces the pace of traditional diplomacy. Inside Iran, the regime faces its own set of complex challenges. Decades of sanctions and economic isolation have taken a toll on the population, leading to periodic waves of internal protest. The leadership must balance its costly regional ambitions with the growing demands of a young, connected generation that seeks a different future. The tension between revolutionary ideology and domestic stability remains a primary factor in Tehran's strategic calculations. Israel, too, is navigating profound internal divisions. The constant state of high alert and the economic burden of prolonged conflict have sparked intense debates about the nation's long-term security strategy. There is a growing realization that military force alone may not be enough to resolve a rivalry that is as much about ideology and regional identity as it is about borders and weapons. The search for a sustainable status quo remains elusive. Beyond the immediate actors, the rivalry is a focal point for global superpowers. While the US remains the primary backer of the status quo, Russia and China have increased their engagement with Iran, seeking to challenge Western hegemony and secure their own energy and trade interests. The Middle East has once again become a primary theater of great power competition, where local rivalries are amplified by global strategic goals. Behind the maps, the missiles, and the diplomatic statements, there is a profound human cost. Millions of people across the region live in a state of perpetual uncertainty, their lives shaped by decisions made in distant command centers. The echoes of the past are not just historical curiosities, they are the lived reality of generations who have known only tension and the shadow of potential conflict. The true tragedy is the lost potential of a region that was once a cradle of shared civilization. As we look toward the horizon, the story of Israel and Iran remains an unfinished chronicle. The ancient bond of Cyrus the Great and the modern alliance of the 1970s prove that hostility is not the only possible path. However, the deep ideological and security rifts of the present suggest that the silent war will continue to echo through the halls of history for years to come. Understanding these echoes is the first step toward imagining a different future. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. If you found this exploration valuable, consider subscribing to Echoes of the Past for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. History is always speaking. We only need to listen. Until next time, keep searching for the truth behind the echoes.